You're tuned to 1320 AM, WKRK 105.5 on the FM dial, cable TV channel 25, and worldwide at country.am. It is a Friday, and we're about 2 minutes early. It's 11:03. Well, it's
maybe
almost
we'll be
11:04.
on time today, then.
That's right. We'll be on time, maybe. And it is time for the Sheriff's Office report, and we have with us our guest on Fridays, Sheriff Derek Palmer of the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing great. You came in and woke me up.
There you
I
go.
was taking a nap. No.
I'm assuming that you had a wonderful Valentine's Day and got showered with gifts and candies and balloons.
Are you
and
judging my weight because of the additional? Yeah, I might have gained an extra pound or two.
There you go.
Even I came in yesterday
Yeah,
and found some more candy on my desk.
I was listening to the school yesterday talking, and I worked for the school there for a while, and I was just chuckling because I remember them from yesterday talking about how Valentine's Day is not a good day in the school system. And I do concur with that. Feelings get hurt and boyfriends and girlfriends get into it, and chocolate is had, and kids are bouncing off of everything.
Like Halloween, all the extra sugar.
I drove a school bus, and I always hated Valentine's Day and Halloween. Those were the two times I dreaded because they would get on the bus so wild, and you couldn't do anything with them. It was just trying to get them dropped off as fast as you could.
Does the sugar affect you that way? I don't think it affects me at all.
I don't think so. I don't get real hyped up or
and
anything.
caffeine affects a lot of people, too.
Right.
I'll drink 3 or 4 cups of coffee, and I'm just finally up to speed.
Right. I try not to drink too many caffeinated drinks or anything like that. My vice is sweet tea. That's what I really like to drink. I drink it 3 times a day, and it's not good for you, and I shouldn't do that. But that's my vice. I don't drink much coffee. I don't drink much soft drinks and those type of things.
I need to drink more water. I know water's just great for people,
Right.
but I don't drink
It's
enough.
like there was a commercial a while back. I think it was for some kind of, I don't remember what it was for. I guess it was a water commercial, but it was a soccer team, and these kids are playing. These moms are bringing out this Kool-Aid and Gatorade and all these type of things. And this little boy, about 4-year-old, looks up and says, "Mom, if our bodies need water, why are we not drinking water?" And that's a good question, isn't it?
That's true.
Right.
Had a busy week in the sheriff's office this week.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good week. It's not been extremely busy, but it's never really a quiet time at the sheriff's office anymore.
It's a good time when you don't have to be busy.
Right.
You mentioned before we went on the air that the break-in and enterings are lower than normal right now.
I checked this morning before I left because I knew that through looking at caseloads and talking to investigators and stuff, I've not been hearing a whole lot about breaking and enterings. They've solved some, and as a matter of fact, they were going out today to work on some more. They got some information about some people that's been breaking in houses, and so I was curious about that, and hadn't been hearing a whole lot about it. So I went and checked our system today, and saw where our breaking and enterings are about at half as much as they have been in the past. So we had been averaging about 40 to 50 a month, somewhere along in there. And for the last several months, it's been in the high 20s, low 30s. And so, so I think in January we had 25 breaking and enterings in January. So it's low.
That's still 25 too many.
That's 25 too many.
But it's lower. That's
right.
a good sign.
Yeah, we were, like I say, we were averaging there for a long time. They were around 50 a month. And
wow.
There were some months it was more than that. And so the investigators and patrol officers have been real vigilant about getting out there and trying to get in some of these areas that hadn't got into in a long time and trying to be visible and those type of things. And investigations have done a great job on solving a lot of these. And we get a lot of our information from the public. And if it's not for the public reporting things to us and information and who's doing what out there, we could do very little. So we really depend on the public a lot for solving these crimes and being involved in things. And, when the public, when you're out there and you're calling in about things, sometimes you may not see, if you call today, you may not see that person arrested that evening or the next day. But understand that we're taking that information and going with it and building cases on people. And people say, well, so-and-so's breaking into houses, or so-and-so's using drugs, or this is a drug house. There's a lot of things we know. But getting a case built on someone and getting it in court and proving it in front of 12 people and a judge is a different situation.
Right.
And so we have to take our time, and we have to build good cases to get them in the court system and get them prosecuted.
Yeah, everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and your job is to get as much proof as possible to get
And
fairness.
that's the thing that I think that a lot of people don't understand. It doesn't matter if you've arrested someone 25 times for breaking into houses or 50 times for possession of drugs. On each particular case, when they go into court, they are assumed to be innocent when they go into court, and you have to prove their guilt. So it doesn't matter that you may have arrested them 50 times in the past. When they come into court, they come in court with a clean slate.
Right.
And you have to prove what they did or what you're accusing them of. And a lot of the public don't understand that. They think, well, there's a lot of traffic in and out of this house. Why can't you just go kick the door in and go arrest them? And, we have, private property rights and those type of things and Constitution, of course, that we have to go by and make sure we don't violate people's rights. And I use this illustration with people. They say, well, I've called 10 times about my neighbor dealing drugs. Why have you not searched their house? Why have you not arrested them? And my response to them is because we got to have proof, and we're building those cases. How would you like it if your neighbor called 10 times on you when you haven't done anything, and we just showed up at your house and kicked your door in and started searching stuff and arrested you? And so people sometimes, when they stop and pause and look at it, they say, oh, yeah, well, that kind of makes sense, And so there's things that we know are going on and we know that's happening, but like I say, building that case and proving it is a complete different situation.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. You mentioned there was a marijuana bust down in the Hanging Dog community this past week.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we don't have to explain that's a controversial topic that that people have very strong opinions about one way or another. And basically what had happened, and we've not done a press release on it yet. We probably will this week sometime. But our civil process department had some papers on some folks down in the Hanging Dog area, and the deputy went down to the residence to serve those civil papers. And when they got down there, they noticed as the person opened the door to come out, there was a strong odor of marijuana coming from the house. And as they were standing in the doorway talking, they could see a marijuana plant just inside the door, growing just inside the door. The officer secured the people and secured the place, and we subsequently did search warrants for the house and things of that nature. And when we went down there, we found an indoor marijuana grow. There were 46 plants that were growing that they were harvesting at the time. But they were also confiscated about 10 pounds of marijuana bud from previous grows that were there in the house. And it appears to be, it's still under investigation, but it appears to be a sale and delivery operation. They were growing other plants, that people use for vitamins and herbs and those type of things. And so we think it was probably just an addition to that legitimate operation that they had. And like I say, we'll do a press release later on in the week about that. And we know it's a controversial topic, and these folks had moved in here some years ago from the Colorado area out west, and and it's like I explained to them, it may be legal in Colorado, and you may be able to do this in Colorado, but it's still illegal in North Carolina. And when an officer observes something that's illegal, they have a duty to respond to that.
They can't just turn their head.
They can't just turn their head and walk away from it. And so depending on what your opinion is about it, one way or another, whether it should be legalized or should not be legalized, at this point in time, it's illegal in North Carolina. And it's like I told these folks down here the other day and told others that, if North Carolina changes the law and makes it legal, it's legal. Nothing we can do about it. We won't worry about it anymore.
If that were to happen, if North Carolina did change the law concerning marijuana, what would happen to all the people that are currently incarcerated with those charges?
Most of the time, changes in laws are not retroactive. Those people that are charged continue to carry out the sentences that was imposed on them.
Because it was illegal at that time.
Because it was legal at the time they did it. There are some instances where legislation passes laws that make it retroactive to where they can go back and re-examine those previous cases. But still at that, no one has the power to overturn the judge's decision. And when the judge makes a sentence, only the judge can go back and overturn those sentences. So if the legislation did do something that was retroactive, it would go back into the judicial system. It would be up to the judicial system to either keep people incarcerated or release them or how they wanted to do that. So, but most laws that are passed are not retroactive. They're just from that date they're passed on. And because at the time of the law it was illegal at that particular time.
Okay. All right. Anybody driving on the roads always seen, at some point in their life, seen blue lights, a traffic stop, someone's been
Right.
pulled over. Tell folks what is proper protocol when somebody gets pulled over, how to behave in a traffic stop. We know you have a lot of issues there,
Right.
and our state troopers do, our local police departments do.
Right.
What is the best way to cooperate with law enforcement to succeed in that traffic stop?
What I always try to encourage people to do is, especially if you're the driver, keep your hands visible, keep them on the steering wheel, to where that officer can see it. Even things like reaching for your wallet and getting your driver's license out and those things, you're better off to leave your hands visible and let the officer give you instructions, or can I see your driver's license, and then you can reach for it. Those type of things. There's nothing illegal about reaching for your driver's license or anything like that. However, there in this day and time there is a public concern of law enforcement. Of officers being overly aggressive, of not doing what they should do. There's always that public concern of that.
Right.
And there's also that officer concern of being safe and someone trying to hurt them or pulling a gun on them or things of that nature. So to me, the best protocol is to just keep your hands visible and wait for that officer to give you instructions. The question comes up a lot: what if I'm carrying a firearm in the car? How am I supposed to deal with that as far as that officer is concerned? I always tell people that, if you have a concealed handgun permit, of course, by law, you're supposed to instruct the officer first thing that you have a concealed permit and you have a weapon in the vehicle. Some people carry openly in their vehicle. They carry with a gun in plain view, and there's nothing illegal about that.
Right.
Even without a concealed handgun permit, you can carry a weapon in plain view. And what I always tell the people who carry in plain view is to be sure before you get stopped, before you actually pull over, be sure and leave that gun up on the dash or somewhere where that officer can readily see it
Right.
when he approaches the vehicle. But once you either tell them you're a concealed holder and you have a weapon, or there is a weapon visible through the vehicle, I always also tell people to be sure to comply with whatever that officer's commands are. Sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, officers handle things differently. And you may have a gun that's in the vehicle, it's concealed or laying on the dash or somewhere we can see it, and you may tell the officer where that weapon is, and he may look at it visibly and see it there and say, okay, just leave it there, don't reach for it. And he may leave it there during the traffic stop. You may have another officer that says, okay, thank you for letting me know. I'm going to hold your weapon, and I'm going to keep it in my possession until this traffic stop's over, and then I'll give it back to you. And so what I usually tell people is either way, whatever that officer asks you to do, just comply with it. Just do whatever he asks you to do. And at the end of that traffic stop, he'll return your weapon back to you and usually unloaded. He'll usually unload the weapon and hand it back to you at that point. So, if you disagree with what an officer did, or you think he's handled something improperly, at that roadside, at that traffic stop is not the place to get into an argument. That's not the place to argue with that officer. Go ahead and comply with that officer's commands. And if he did something he shouldn't have done, there are legal remedies to rectify that. There's internal investigations. There's civil lawsuits you can file. There's all kind of different things that you can rectify that situation. But unfortunately, people want to do that by arguing on the roadside. And sometimes those arguments can turn into either criminal activity where you may get arrested, that officer may arrest you, or if you resist that arrest, it could turn into something tragic on the roadside. And it could be something that can be completely avoided, that if you had just complied with the officer's commands and done what he had asked you to do. And then you could have come later if he did something wrong and fixed it within the court system later.
What rights does the driver have? What kind of questions can he ask the law enforcement officer, or what does he have to give consent for search of vehicle, things like that?
There's a couple different things. One is, you can pretty much ask the officer anything you want to ask him as long as you're not impeding the investigation. If you, ask him his name or who he works for, badge number, those type of things, those are perfectly legal questions you can ask the officer. But you don't want to continually ask the officer questions just impeding his job, just to keep him from investigating whatever it is he pulled you over
I think
for.
a lot of times some of those questions will provoke the officer,
Right.
and they're intended to do so.
Right. And so, like I say, a lot of those questions are intended to get into an argument or to have a response to where you can argue back and forth with the officer about the legality of the stop and
Right.
all those type of things. And like I say, if you were stopped illegally or the officer did something that was wrong, there's nothing wrong with asking the questions, but still comply with what the officer's asking you to do. And then if he did something, if he did an illegal traffic stop, if it was an illegal search and seizure, or if he did something illegally, there's a court system to rectify all of that, and lawsuits that can be filed and all those type of things. But when you get to a place where you're impeding that officer's investigation for whatever he stopped you for, that's actually a crime, and he can arrest you for that. It's called resist, obstruct, and delay. Resist is if you're actually being arrested and you're resisting that arrest. Obstruction is telling falsehoods or lies to impede the investigation.
Right.
And a delay is just hindering that officer from investigating. It's just to keep him from doing whatever it is that his job is doing at that time. And so if you're delaying the traffic stop by asking a lot of questions, if you're delaying what he's investigating by just trying to be argumentative and those type of things, those are arrestable offenses, and you can be arrested for that. And so a lot of people don't understand that. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with asking any question you want to ask, but you can't do it to a point that you're delaying that officer's investigation. When you come to search and seizures and things of that nature, you have the right to refuse a search. If an officer asks you to search your vehicle, you can say, no, I don't give consent to search my vehicle, that would be up to that officer to either obtain a search warrant or have some probable cause, reasonable suspicion to search your vehicle. It falls in probable cause range. But, for example, if an officer pulls you over and he sees illegal substance within your car, he may see a smoking apparatus, or he may see a bag of what he believes to be marijuana or some other drug in your vehicle, or something to make him believe there's a crime taking place, he may not need your consent to search. He can go ahead and search that based on what he saw, his probable cause. Canines, for example, if you have someone that refuses consent to search, and that officer is a canine officer, and they run a canine around your vehicle during that traffic stop, and that canine alerts to there being something illegal within that vehicle, that gives that officer probable cause to search that vehicle. He doesn't need a search warrant or doesn't need your consent to search that vehicle at that point. So it's hard to put everything into a box and say it's always this way or always that way, because there's so many different circumstances that could come into that could either make it a valid stop or an invalid stop. And that's why we have all these attorneys around everywhere that argue all these cases in court and argue the legalities of things. And that's why laws change every legislative meeting, and that's why things will be different a year from now than they are today, because when things go through the court system, they argue the legalities of these things, and what an officer can do today, he may not be able to do tomorrow. And what an officer cannot do today, he may be able to do tomorrow. So
it really does amaze me, because I've thought about this in the past, that we have lawmakers and how many different laws that we have that changed. I would think that the laws that we had 100 years ago would still be applicable today, that we still have the same values, but we don't.
For a law enforcement officer, it doesn't matter what you're in. Any type of law enforcement officer has to go through in-service classes to keep your certifications up to date. And you have to take mandatory classes every year to keep your certification. And one of those classes that law enforcement officers take is called legal updates.
Legal updates.
And what they do is every year you have to go at least once a year and look at all the law changes. And they have, or not all, but major law changes that affects on a daily basis. And you look at these things where Supreme Court rulings and laws that's changed within the state and rulings from the bench and these type of things that's happened within the previous year, so that law enforcement officers are up to date on what changes are made in the laws and what goes on. And like I say, something may be perfectly legal today, but this time next year an officer can't do it.
Right.
Or you may have something that they say, no, you can't do now as a law enforcement officer. You can't search based on this probable cause, but next year you may be able to. It just depends on what kind of court rulings come out, Supreme Court rulings and things of that nature.
And it's because of so many changes, it's almost impossible for the everyday person to know all the laws that are in place, because there are so many.
It is.
But I think people, if they have a basic sense of right and wrong, they're usually pretty good shape.
Well, my attitude is, and for example, I'm going to give you this. For example, my son was riding down the road one day, and a highway patrolman passed, and he said, "I'm going to ask you a question." I said, "What?" And he said, "What if you're speeding and a highway patrolman pulls you over as sheriff, and he tries to write you a ticket? What would you do?" I said, well, if he tried to write me a ticket, I guess I'd keep my mouth shut and get my ticket, you know.
Right.
And I think as citizens, that's kind of the attitude that we need to have, is that, you know, you go ahead and comply with what that officer is doing there on the roadside. And if he did something wrong or you want to contest it, you can do that through the court system. You can do it, you know, through the district attorney's office and all these different things that you have these remedies for. But even as sheriff, you know, even though I'm the head law enforcement official for the county, if I was speeding and I was guilty and someone tried to write me a ticket, on that roadside's not the place to argue and fight about it.
Right.
You know, you go ahead and comply with what that officer is going to do, and then you deal with it later. And I think from the citizen point of view, that's the point of view that citizens need to have when dealing with law enforcement. Is it worth your life to prove you're right?
Right. And I think that is a situation where a lot of people are unable to communicate with each other, whether it's law enforcement or just to their spouse,
Right.
their relatives, without being confrontational. There's
Right.
a need for more open dialogue between people now, just to exist as a human race.
Right. And, you know, you look at some of these things on TVs where there have been officer-involved shootings and persons have lost their lives and all that, and you may go back and analyze it and say, well, that officer, the guy that got shot was right. That officer shouldn't have done what he did, and he shouldn't have stopped him and shouldn't have done all this. But my argument always goes back to, but was it worth getting killed over?
Right.
You know.
Look at the big picture.
Right. Is it, even though he was right, was it worth getting into this argument and getting shot over? You know, goes back to what I said before. If those officers had stopped somebody illegally or done something wrong or detained them or abused them or whatever they did, that place on the road is not the time to deal with that. You comply with what the officer's telling you to do. And those people that wound up getting shot, or those people that died, you know, even though they may be right, they could still be alive today and could have got satisfaction through the court system and other things, you know, for what this officer did that was wrong. To me, it's not worth losing your life over.
And I'm guessing that an officer who pulls over someone who is polite, cooperates, and just is, you know,
Right.
Nice.
Well,
and
I will tell you
respectful.
that. I will tell you this: when I was on patrol as a deputy sheriff, my attitude on pulling cars over and stopping people was that I was looking for drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for drunk drivers and people that's breaking into houses and committing those type of crimes. And my attitude was, if you didn't fall into these categories, I'm probably not going to write you a ticket. I'm just going to turn you, you know, inspect things, see what's going on, and if everything's good and you were speeding, yeah, you probably shouldn't have done it. I'm going to give you a verbal warning and say, you know, don't do it again and slow down. We don't want you getting in an accident, and send them on their way. And there has been times that I approached the car with that attitude, but because of the person's actions, by the time we got done, they got a ticket or they got took to jail or something of that nature, where the intentions to begin with was just to give them a warning and send them on down the road, you know.
Their actions just threw up red flags.
Right, you know. And so, you know, that's the thing that's an important thing about people. I'm not saying that every time you're nice, you're not going to get a ticket. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not going to say that every time you're upset, you're going to get a ticket. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is your attitude can drive that situation to one side or the other. And so, and it's always best to be polite and courteous. And
It doesn't hurt a thing, does it?
Doesn't hurt a thing.
All right. We had a question come in about what is the difference between secured bond and unsecured bond? How does that work?
When someone is arrested and brought in front of the magistrate or a judicial official, there's some things that magistrate or that judicial official has to take in consideration. One thing that we do want to make sure that everybody understands, we've said this many times over the years, but sometimes people forget it, is bonds are not punitive. Mm-hmm. Magistrates and judicial officials do not set bonds to punish people. And so one of the things that they don't take into consideration that's not an issue is they don't take into consideration whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, whether I like you or don't like you. That has nothing to do with it. What it has to do with on the bond set is to ensure that you appear in court. Mm-hmm. That's what a bond is for. And so if you are a local resident with no really priors or nothing going on there, typically what a judge will do is say, okay, you're a Cherokee County resident, you have a home here, you have land here. The chances of you leaving Cherokee County and jumping bond and going out of state or moving to California is very slim. And so therefore, because you're going to be here and because you're not looking at going anywhere, and this may be a low-grade misdemeanor or something, you know, they may set what they call an unsecured bond, which means they may set a monetary amount on that bond, but you don't have to pay it. You don't have to put that money up front. It means that you write on the bond sheet, I promise to appear in court, and if I don't appear in court, this is you said this is the amount of money that I'm going to have to pay if I don't appear in court.
Okay.
Okay. And so they, and that's kind of a Cliff Note version. That's not exactly correct, but that's just kind of an idea that people understand how it works. But basically, what the difference between secured and unsecured is that a secured bond, someone has either put the money down for that monetary amount, or they put some type of real property in Cherokee County down for that monetary amount. So if your bond is set, say it's $50,000 secured, then what that means is somebody went to the magistrate or went to the clerk's office and gave them either $50,000 in cash, or they have to put some property up and sign property over that's worth at least $50,000. Actually, I think it's a percentage more than that it has to be, but they have to put that property up to ensure the courts that you will show up for court. And if you don't show up for court, then that money is forfeited to the clerk's office and goes to the state.
Okay.
So if you have an unsecured bond, like I say, you say it's $5,000 unsecured, means there's no money put up, nobody showed up and gave anybody money, nobody put property up or anything like that. But if you don't show up for court, then the judge that's on the bench that day can either secure that bond and have an order of arrest to go pick you up, and when you pick them up, they're going to be under this bond amount, and they have to pay this much cash to get back out of jail.
Okay,
So,
well, that clears that up.
yeah,
That makes sense.
And like I say, that those bonds are not for punitive reasons. They're just to make sure that you appear for court. That
But
you show up for
regardless of
court.
how many times we tell people that, people still read that's a punishment amount.
Yeah. And, and sometimes people look at that and they say, well, they were a drug dealer, or they got, a trafficking amount of drugs or whatever, or these things happen. Why in the world would a judge give them unsecured bond? Well, it may be simply the fact of that they're a local resident. They live here. They have property here. They have business here. They have those type of things. And so there's not a flight risk. There's no reason that they would go anywhere or move anywhere else. And so the chances of them showing up for court would be pretty high.
Okay.
And, it's not necessarily what they did, even though there's bond amounts attached to those crimes. But the unsecured or secured pretty much goes with what type of flight risk you are.
All right. I see your time is getting a little bit going. Want to tell us about February 25th?
Oh, yeah. I just want to mention this real quick. A lot of people say, well, I have speaking engagements that I go all over the place and do different, sermons or speaking engagements and things of that nature. And people say, I wish I knew you were so-and-so, and I would have been there and watched. But on February 25th, they're having a men's breakfast at Valleytown Baptist Church.
That's a week from this.
That's a week from tomorrow. They'll be having a prayer breakfast there, and the men of the church will be there, and I'm the guest speaker for the day. And so I will be bringing a short motivational speech that morning and slash sermon. I really don't know what I'm going to do yet, but got some ideas. But I'll be speaking there that morning, so if anybody around would like to come up there and take part in that, you're more than welcome to come. And what I will try to do is, as I have speaking engagements, I'll try to announce those on the radio. So if anybody wants to attend those or come to those, they'll know where I'll be speaking at in different places, and so they can come listen if they'd like.
Very good. I hear you're going to be speaking here on WKRK next week, the same time, right?
Next Friday, 11 o'clock. That's where I'm scheduled.
Sounds great. Sheriff, thank you very much for the information and for being here on our weekly program, and a great, valuable service to our community.
Thank you very much.
It's WKRK Radio, Murphy, North Carolina, 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, and worldwide at country.am.